we've got two players at 5-0, Malira Pod. And you see, Luis is going to give him one of those Hall of Fame pins. As we are underway, Scott-Vargas with a Temple Garden. And we'll watch the world champ here, Shenhar, started off with a treetop village.
Luis he lives for moments like that, where you just got to slide the pin across to Shahar. Hey, just in case you never played against a Hall of Famer.
Verdant Catacombs going to go down to 19, Will Scott-Vargas.
Now, Luis Scott-Vargas is playing Malira Pod. As we saw earlier today, another, basically just Malira, the pretty standard Malira deck, where Shahar is playing the black-green Obliterator deck that Reed Duke and Matt Costa unveiled 2 weeks ago.
See a Twilight Mire into a Scavenging Ooze. So both players with their green decks getting off with some 2 drops here. Of course, the Qasali Pride Mage, due to Exalted, will be able to come into the red zone. And we'll see what else Luis wants to add to his board here momentarily, as there's a Verdant Catacombs. We'll see what land he's going to search up. But I think this matchup here is probably a difficult one for Shenhar.
Yeah, I mean, it generally favors Luis. Abrupt Decay is such an important part of the black-green deck's ability to remove creatures, and it does not hit Birthing Pod. Additionally, the black-green deck doesn't put a ton of pressure on you. It's got some discard, but here he doesn't even have the discard spell to try to hit the pod. And now that it's stuck, if he doesn't have one of the 2 Maelstrom Pulses, things are just going to get bad for him over the course of the next couple of turns. Now, the big advantage of these black-green decks is they can be tuned very well for sideboard, when he has access to things like Grafdigger's Cage. But game 1, going to be a little bit more rough.
You see both players playing 3 mana spells. I use 3 in quotes, as Birthing Pod can be played for 3 mana. That comes down for Scott-Vargas. Shenhar has a Liliana the Veil to take care of that Qasali Pride Mage. And Liliana the Veil, again, a card that hasn't been seeing a lot of play, as Deathrite Shaman and kind of Jund as a result has rotated out of the format, some like to say. However, it is here for Shenhar. As you saw, Scott-Vargas is going to activate Birthing Pod, sacrifice a Birds of Paradise, and get a 2 mana spell.
He does get Voice of Resurgence, so that even if Shahar has a removal spell, he's assured of having a body to be able to sack to the pod and to threaten to do damage to Liliana.
So there is the Voice. There's an Overgrown Tomb tapped for Scott-Vargas, and he'll pass the turn back over to Shenhar, who does have a little something he can remove now for Scavenging Ooze, since that Birds of Paradise and Pride Mage are in the graveyard. But he's got to get some pressure going.
Yeah, I mean, Shahar has the Scavenging Ooze. It's going to do some damage. He's got Liliana as a thing Luis has to deal with at some point, and he's got Treetop Village threatening to start attacking. He really wants to hit Luis's life total as hard as he can. Luis, on the other hand, every turn that goes by, he's going to be 1 step closer to building an insurmountable board.
You see Liliana's going to tick up. Shenhar is going to discard the Marsh Flat. Scott-Vargas a Temple Garden. And we'll see what the World Champion does want to do moving forward here. Now, you did mention Abrupt Decay is a key card for this deck, but it can't take care of Birthing Pod. One card that can is Maelstrom Pulse, a 2 of here in Shahar's deck.
Definitely. But it looks like at the moment, Shahar is a little bit flooded.
Yeah, a lot of lands and a Dark Confidant looks like in his hand. Now, one of those lands is the Treetop Village, so it can play a dual role, as here is Dark Confidant. There's a Treetop Village and just passes the turn back.
And he keeps the Scavenging in his home,
letting
the Liliana stay protected without having to put Dark Confidant in harm's way.
I feel like that's basically him saying this Liliana is very, very important for me winning the game. And in comes the Voice of Resurgence at Liliana.
Interesting. What is this a statement of? Because the Ooze could just block and eat the Voice, right?
Yeah. Now, he still would get the Voice token.
Yes.
But yeah, he can eat what's in the graveyard here. So,
but this is threatening to kill both the Dark Confidant and the Scavenging Ooze if Luis has a 2, with Birthing Pod going to find Orzhov Pontiff, because Shahar doesn't know that Luis doesn't have an Orzhov Pontiff.
We saw a little bit earlier, as you see Dark Confidant's going to trade Voice of Resurgence. We saw Orzhov Pontiff play a huge role in round, I believe it was either 2 or 3 that you and I covered in the mirror. But there is no main deck Pontiff in Scott-Vargas' list of Malira Pod.
Yeah, and LSV is able to make this play here. Largely, it's kind of a semi-bluff, but at the same time, he has Eternal Witness anyway, which he's planning on playing to get back something and then being able to Birthing Pod and turn the Eternal Witness into either a Murderous Redcap or a Ranger of Eos.
Yeah. So it looked like maybe Scott-Vargas was trying to trap Shenhar there a little bit. We'll see what else he wants to do this turn, because you did mention he does have Eternal Witness in his hand. Targets are a little bit slim because of Scavenging Ooze, of course, going to make it a little bit difficult, but here is the Witness. We'll see what Scott-Vargas does target in his graveyard.
Yeah, in that spot, if Shahar had eaten the Voice of Resurgence, he would have been able to actually successfully regrow something.
Yeah.
As it is now, he just needs to play the Eternal Witness anyway in order to have something to sack to the pod. And he actually targets his land so as to keep the Ooze a little smaller, because whatever he's going to target is going to get hit.
Eternal Witness is going to get sacrificed to Birthing Pod. Luis will take 2 in the process. And you saw that's exactly why he targeted his land as opposed to a creature. He targets a creature, Ooze becomes a 3/3. Luis is going to then, of course, get Murderous Redcap, deal 2 damage to the Scavenging Ooze. So
that was very well played by Luis.
Surprise, surprise.
The old man still got a trick or two up his sleeve. I like it.
Now we take a look at Shenhar's board here. He's got that Liliana Veil that's on 2, and wow, he's just going to pack it in very quickly, knowing that he cannot come back from Birthing Pod activations.
Yeah, like in this spot right here, it seems so early to concede, but he knows that he has no hope of forward progress because on the very next turn, LSV is going to activate Birthing Pod, sacrifice the Murderous Redcap, and get back and search his deck for Revelark. And at that point, Shahar won't be able to make forward progress because the Revelark in play represents a significant threat that will kill him very quickly. And Luis in his graveyard has Eternal Witness, which Shahar lost to Scavenging Ooze. He can no longer even interact with. Basically, this black-green deck is not a play from behind kind of deck. Once he's in this spot, he has no hope of making any forward progress again game 1.
You know, it's like Shahar's life total is very high, and he's not, quote, dead, but he's actually dead. It's just going to take, you know, a couple of turns, basically. We'll take a look at the sideboards first. We'll go to Shahar's sideboard here, the green-black rock deck. Again, a pretty difficult matchup for him, but we take a look at 2 copies of Thoughtseize, a Deathmark, a Sword of Light and Shadow, a Thrun the Last Troll, 3 copies of Fulminator Mage, a Kitchen Finks, 2 copies of Grafdigger's Cage, and 4 copies of Creeping Corrosion. Somebody doesn't want to lose to Affinity, but 2 Grafdigger's Cage are very obvious. How do you feel about the rest of these options?
So Fulminator Mage is always an option when you like if you just need to move away from, if you want to move away from some of your other creatures like Kitchen Finks, like if you're not as concerned about the beatdown, or Obliterator if you think it's too slow.
Okay.
The Fulminator Mage is not the most disruptive in this matchup, but it is a non-zero amount and certainly better on the play. I think the primary things that he wants, though, he definitely needs the Thoughtseizes, he definitely needs the Grafdigger's Cage, and I think he will consider the Deathmark just because hitting the mana creature is so good in this matchup.
Take a look at Scott-Vargas' sideboard, and we're going to see this a lot with pod decks. There's 4 Thoughtseizes, and there's a whole bunch of 1-ups he can choose from.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here, there's really not a lot he needs to do. It's a question of how much is he cutting. But most of the bullets he's not even going to want. Man, I don't know that there's very much he wants at all beyond the Path to Exiles, being able to hit Tarmogoyf or Phyrexian Obliterator.
I was going to say maybe Thrun, maybe.
It's just so tough when he knows that he's facing somebody with 4 Lilianas.
Sure.
So, yeah, I mean, it's always possible. I think the real question is how many cards does he actually have to cut? His deck is already very well configured to defeat Black-Green game 1. He really doesn't have a lot of cards. Well, he doesn't have any cards to bring in. He really doesn't have a lot of cards to take out either.
Yeah, I mean, you take a look at the sideboard for this list that Scott-Vargas has in front of him. You know, he's got a Burrington Forge Tender, a Nethersworn Canonist, Kataki, Orzhov Pontiff, Sin Collector, Harmonic Sliver, and Tumor Exarch, cards that are better against control and combo decks. He's up against a very fair mid-rangey deck, and you know, Luis's deck is better at kind of out mid-ranging Shahar than Shahar's deck is, so he doesn't need to change a lot. I like the mention of Path to Exile because Obliterator can be a problem. But again, I'm kind of with you where he doesn't have to change a ton here to be able to win the matchup.
Yeah, my guess is he's going to cut the Thrun from his main deck. He might bring in the Orzhov Pontiff just to have, you know, it as a tactical weapon and a possible out to Dark Confidant. But I think the main thing is that he's going to want Path to Exile to make sure that he has answers to Scavenging Ooze.
Now, one thing we see in the main deck here, Scott-Vargas' deck, that we haven't seen in some of the other pod decks, it looks like a lot of people moved away from it, is the combo of Spike Feeder plus Archangel of Doom. That'll let you kind of Mondo combo, another way to gain infinite life. He's actually using it this weekend as opposed to not. How do you feel about the inclusion of that, even though people have been moving away from it?
Oh, I like it a lot. See, a lot of people just rely on the Kitchen Finks, Malira, Viscera Seer combo to gain infinite life, but LSV actually has as a second infinite life combo Spike Feeder and Archangel of Thune. And the reason I like it so much is that Scavenging Ooze is extremely popular this weekend, and that is an infinite life combo that does not use the graveyard at all.
We're going to see a Thoughtseize fire away. You see Scott-Vargas' hand of a Thrun, a Kitchen Finks, and a whole bunch of lands, among them a Gavney Township.
So he did keep the Thrun in, which in this case means that he is content to just play a mid-rangey sort of game. And this hand is going to play right into that. You know, the Kitchen Finks Gavney Township interaction, quite strong. Particularly against a deck as fair as this black-green deck. If they don't have Kitchen Finks, they're going to be, you know, they're going to have a real hard time with that combo if the game goes long.
See what card Shahar wants to take here. He's working with some information on what Luis has. Luis is going to need some draw steps here, obviously, to get back into it. Plenty of them coming because Shahar's deck doesn't close very quickly. And he is going to take kitchen finks, basically saying, Luis, your first play will be on turn 4, assuming, things don't go well for you.
Now, Shahar, well known for being one of the 20 best limited players in the world, according to many, is no stranger to the Grand Prix scene. I mean, he's won, 3 Grand Prix at this point?
I think he has 3 titles, yeah.
That's incredible. And he's just 20 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, this kid is quite the phenom.
Got a Dark Confidant here for Shenhar. See, Scott-Vargas is going to sacrifice the Misty Rainforest. He's going to consult his hand before searching. It's going to be a Temple Garden as he does go down to 19. We're going to have a little race to see who the best young player is nowadays between him and Jacob Wilson. And those guys know each other pretty well, too. That's a little bit of a battle there.
There's definitely a nice new generation of players that are coming up. It's funny to think of people like Reed and Owen is not even the young generation anymore.
Yeah, I think they're 24 or something.
Yeah, I mean, they used to be the young generation a few years ago.
See a sort of light and shadow turned over from Dark Confidant, and Scott-Vargas just played Verdant Catacombs and passes the turn back. Shenhar added a Tarmogoyf to his hand as well, so he can start to get a little bit aggressive here. And Sword might actually play a pretty big role in this game as Dark Confidant comes across for 2.
These kids don't know how good they got it. When I was their age, back then, the 20-year-olds were the veterans. The 16, 15-year-olds, they were the people that were up and coming.
A Scavenging Ooze here for Shahar. He's going to pass the turn back. Luis will sacrifice a fetch line yet again. He's going to go down to 16. Things have changed, obviously, with the ability to play Magic online at such a young age. You can really get good fast.
Oh, yeah, and there's electricity now.
Yeah,
a lot of things have changed since when we were good, All right, so Luis Scott-Vargas with Godless Shrine and Temple Garden. It looks like plenty of mana in hand, too, but he is way behind on the board, and with no play on turn 3, he's about to be run over. I mean, Shahar's, first of all, has basically a 3-turn clock, but even beyond that, Shahar's drawing 2 cards a turn. This is and even has a relevant card like Maelstrom Pulse in case Luis starts doing anything relevant. What's Luis need to do to turn this around?
Play something would be step 1. Honestly, I think he's just drawn a couple of lands after the Thought Seize, and now here's Thought Seize. Yeah, and he's just drawn lands as he discards Throne immediately. So that's all he's drawn. He's drawn 2 spells in his opening hand. They're both gone. Ooze can remove the Thrun, and now Luis has to draw, running spells over the course of the game, and one of the spells that he draws has to not be pulsable, as here's a Tarmogoyf and passing the turn back.
So now, those of you who have ever watched poker will notice that right now, you can't quite see here, but there should be the percentage indicators of chances of winning, and Luis is currently at 1.2%.
Ooh, that's a lot.
Oh yeah, well he's that good. Yeah. But, so another Tarmogoyf hits. Luis hoping to draw a bunch of cards that he doesn't play with.
He's got 1 mystery card. You see him playing with the other cards face up as Luis and Shahar are fairly good friends, so not going to make Shahar write it all down. He's just going to pass the turn back. Dark Confidant Trigger's going to reveal a Scavenging Ooze. He'll go down to 9. He'll draw another card. It's a Swamp, which will give him enough black mana to cast Phyrexian Obliterator if he so chooses. But obviously, Scott-Vargas is in a world of trouble right now.
When you're Shahar, when you're playing when you're playing a rock deck, when you have Dark Confidant, Scavenging Ooze, and Tarmogoyf here, you got to be asking yourself, how can I make sure to play around the only possible ways I could lose? What is it that he could possibly have?
The answer is nothing.
Confidence. Shahar strikes into the red zone. Luis packs it in. We go to game 3.
Luis with the no spell plan, game 2.
Luis is trying to make it interesting for the folks at home. Now, a lot of people were big fans of Luis's performance on Sunday, 2 weeks ago in Valencia, doing commentary.
Indeed.
He's definitely been very, very good as of late in that role. How much Modern do you think Luis has played since the Pro Tour? I mean, obviously he played a bunch leading up to it, but he did switch to Melirapod.
At the Pro Tour, what did he play?
Scape Shift.
Okay. It's a good question. This is a very difficult deck to switch to. Obviously he's very capable of switching to a deck of this caliber, but there are a lot of decision patterns to go through with this deck, and we saw game 1 where he kind of rope-a-dope Shahar a little bit with the Murderous Redcap play. So obviously he's got the skills and the chops to play the deck. I think my strategy for game 3 would be to cast a spell.
So historically, the Scape Shift deck has been better off against Zoo and Blue decks, but not what you want to play in a combo-heavy field.
Yeah.
And with as combo heavy as the field was 2 weeks ago, it makes sense that he would switch to a deck with a little bit more disruption and a little bit faster of a combo.
You're thinking Scape Shift not a good choice coming into this particular tournament as well?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Scape Shift did reasonable 2 weeks ago, but I don't think it's where I'd want to be this week.
Now, I believe Team Channel Fireball, I know Ben Stark played the green-red version. Luis as well, green-red, or did he have a little...
Oh, I'm not even sure. They were splintered 7 or 8 different ways.
Okay,
I mean,
gotcha.
they had hardly any deck on their team with more than 3 people playing it. So they were, like us, splintered many different ways where they realize, you know what, this is a format where the best deck is not that much better than the 15th best deck. You should play what you know, what you're comfortable with. You should play something that you're, because the games, I mean, obviously sometimes somebody will, have a rough mana draw or just be flooded, but an awful lot of the games are so intense with so many decision points, and it's so punishing if you ever, one misstep can be so brutal.
So both players going to shuffle up. We'll start game number 3 here in just a moment here between Shahar, Shenhar, and Luis Scott-Vargas. Both these players sitting at 5-0, but we do appreciate you joining us at home. Cedric Phillips, Patrick Chapin, and Matthias Hunt, even though he's not in the booth right now.
He's with us in spirit.
He is. Star City Games presenting Grand Prix Richmond. We're in round 6 of 15 here, having an absolute blast as we do make our way through the modern tournament here. The largest constructed tournament of all time. 4,300 players did come out to Richmond. We're thankful for all of them and thankful for you guys at home who are watching 2 great Magic players do battle as Scott-Vargas is going to sacrifice Misty Rainforest. He'll search out a dual land, and Shenhar does have a Treetop Village to begin things.
Treetop Village, not an unusual opening. It's funny that somebody with so many Phyrexian Obliterators can get away with 4 Treetop Villages, but that's just the power of Urborgs and Twilight Mires.
Yeah, 2 Urborgs and then 4 Twilight Mires in this deck to help cast Phyrexian Obliterator on turn number 4. Scott-Vargas is going to sacrifice Verdant Catacombs, go down to 18, get a basic forest, and we'll see what the follow-up play is going to be.
I'm loving this whole Phyrexian Obliterator is a real card thing, too.
I like Phyrexian Obliterator. That card's sweet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's funny, Phyrexian Obliterator kind of took a major spike within the last 4 or 5 months once Devotion to Black started becoming a thing on the radar of people in high-level tournament play and casual play alike. So we see a Dark Confidant from Shahar, threatening to start giving him an advantage every turn. This is the best card in his deck against Luis.
Scott-Vargas is going to sacrifice Verdant Catacombs. He's going to go down to 17, get a basic Swamp to go along with that Voice of Resurgence. We'll see what his 3rd turn will net. So he obviously has the intentions of casting a spell, and there's a Birthing Pod. He'll take 2 to do so, but I think he's rather happy with that exchange. As Dark Confidant's going to reveal a Twilight Mire.
Now the real question is, does Shahar have a Grafdigger's Cage or a Maelstrom Pulse?
Yes.
Because if he doesn't, things are going to spiral out of control very quickly. But if he does, he's got the upper hand because of this Dark Confidant.
And we saw that happen in game 1. It only takes a couple Birthing Pod activations. In that game, it only took 1. And that sent Shenhar packing.
Shahar, quite possibly the best European player in the world at the moment right now. There's quite a number of people vying for the throne, but a lot of people forget how European Shahar is.
Dark Confidant coming into the red zone here in the face of Voice of Resurgence. Scott-Vargas says, I'm more than happy to block. There is your Voice of Resurgence Elemental token. We'll see what Shenhar has a follow-up. You see a Dark Confidant in his hand. He's going to play a Forest. He'll follow up with a Scavenging Ooze and pass the turn back.
The nice thing about Scavenging Ooze in this position is that it's actually disrupting Luis a little bit. You know, it's actually going to have an impact. And part of the reason why he was willing to trade his Dark Confidant for the Voice there was that he just wants to slow Luis's climb up the chain. If Luis ever gets to Revelark, it's basically a wrap unless Shahar can keep this Ooze on the table. And in this case, obviously Luis can kill the Ooze relatively easily when you can Demonic Tutor at will.
Now, you cannot sacrifice Shriekball to Birthing Pod. That one's not going to work because Birthing Pod can only be used as a sorcery. But Shriekball will get the job done of getting Scavenging Ooze off the table, which is very important for the Malaria Pod deck. You see, Shahar is going to use that to remove Voice of Resurgence and gain a life, push himself up to 21. The Elemental token is going to come across. It'll knock Shenhar back down to 20. Luis will play a Gavany Township, and he will activate Birthing Pod, so he's going to go get a 1-drop. And it's going to be a Noble Hierarch.
Just in case he needs to bring the beats, and mostly just because when it doesn't matter, the Noble Hierarch is very expendable, But you never know. Sometime you might need to bring the noble deep beats. He doesn't want to lose a Viserys Seer here because he has the, other plans for that guy in case he actually does get a chance to combo off at some point.
So you see Shahar does have a Twilight Mire in his hand. He's also got a Tarmogoyf as well. The one thing that it's made readily clear that he doesn't have in his hand, unfortunately, is a way to deal with Birthing Pod. But he's going to start things up with a Phyrexian Obliterator. So this is going to have to really force Scott-Vargas to get moving now, because this is a real
absolutely.
clock.
Yeah, I mean, he's got, first of all, this means that LSV is going to have to be, a little careful with his life total. But second of all, he hits 2 hits that he can just take 2 hits, but then at that point, he's going to have to just start throwing permanents away to stay alive, Now, the good news is he's got a variety of possible ways to get out of this. I mean, 3 turns is a long time when you're demonic tutoring every turn.
We're going to activate the old Birthing Pod here. And Luis did use a Verdant Catacombs before doing this, so he's doing it all at once, very quickly. And you see both players making sure everything's okay, so we make sure as well. And we'll see what 2-mana spell he's going to search up now, and it's going to be a Voice of Resurgence. See what the follow play is going to be. That's a copy of Revelark. You mentioned this is a big one in this matchup.
Wow, this is going to be brutal. And now he's threatening to be able to voice up Eternal Witness, too.
Yeah.
If he can pull that off, this game's going to spiral out of control. I mean, I guess it already is spiraling. It's going to spiral even more.
Yeah, it's only going to take another Birth Mod activation or 2 before Shahar won't be able to catch up, but he's going to try to close the door pretty quickly. You see Scott-Vargas that turn, because of the fetch land and Birthing Pod, he went down to 12. So he's getting lower, and as you mentioned, he can probably take the first 2 shots from Obliterator. Maybe it's only 1 now, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as LSV doesn't pay any more life, he can take 1 shot he can take 2 shots for free. But this Scavenging Ooze is a real big game.
So Scavenging Ooze pre-combat, and then in comes the Obliterator. So a 5-point chunk taken out of Scott-Vargas. He goes down to 7.
That was the best possible card for Shahar in that position, because he broke up the nearly unbeatable Revelark combo of LSVs. At this point, LSV is probably going to have to actually do something about that Obliterator.
Yeah.
I mean, he can stall with cards like Wall of Roots or Spike. Spellskite. But I mean, at this point, he can't do any of his combos other than the slow and difficult to set up Spike Feeder plus Archangel of Thune. Most likely, he just needs to get a lot of value down.
See, Shahar has a Tarmogoyf in his hand. He's considering deploying that, but he says, I want to be able to leave up 3 mana for Scavenging Ooze activation. So he's going to pass the turn back over to Scott-Vargas. So he'll take a draw. He's got a bunch of mana in play among those lands of Gavany Township with the appropriate mana to activate that. You see the Birthing Pod, the Voice of Resurgence, and the Revelark. Now, this Birthing Pod list does not go up to 6, so you're not going to find any Sun Titan, Grave Titan, any of that stuff in there. But Voice of Resurgence can go from 2 to 3, and there are a lot of good 3s to search for.
Oh, definitely. Although what's really interesting about this position is that Shahar knows that Louise's Shriekmaw is already gone.
Yep.
And with Shriekmaw already gone, it's going to be a lot tougher for Louise to actually do anything about that Scavenging Ooze.
But let's not forget, there is Eternal Witness. But that obviously isn't going to work so great with the Scavenging Ooze. So if maybe Louise can maybe trick Shahar into tapping down a bunch of mana, who knows? It's kind of funny. You kind of undervalue just how much Malaria Pod deck uses their graveyard.
Oh, definitely. And it's funny, the Obliterator's trample makes it very difficult for Louise to actually do anything about this, because if normally you might throw a creature in front and sack it or whatever, but the Obliterator, you can't really chump block, and you can't throw a lot. Like, if you throw a bunch of creatures in front of it, you're going to lose your whole board.
Yeah.
For those not familiar, the Phyrexian Obliterator is a 5/5 trample that for every point of damage it takes, your opponent has to sacrifice a creature.
There you're going to see Kitchen Finks, and there's another copy of Birthing Pod. So Luis is going to take some damage, but he's really working up his pod chains now, and he can start activating multiple pods a turn as he goes down to 7 and passes the turn back here.
So he does have just 1 hit left that he can soak up from the Obliterator before he's going to have to, throw everything away on it. But the hope is that he can quickly assemble, like next turn he can sack the Finks to go get a Ranger of Eos or any other 4-drop and sack that to go get a Archangel.
So Shahar's going to use Victim of Night to take down
the Kitchen
Finks and then remove it via Persist. So that's not going to come back.
And that's a really strong play because, as we were just discussing, getting up the chain, getting up to like an Archangel of Thune or any of the 4-drops is Louise's primary plan right now.
Yep. Scavenging Ooze is a real wrench in the plans right now for everything Luis is trying to do. And, I asked you exactly why he was playing Spike Feeder plus Archangel, then it might be for this exact card. Because Scavenging is such a pain.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the A plan is to hit it with Shriek Maw, but that's already gone.
Yep.
The B plan is to hit it with one of your Abrupt Decays or Path to Exiles, but he has to wait until he draws one.
Yep.
So at this point, he's on the C plan. He's got his Birthing Pods. He just has to put down enough value so that he can afford to eventually suck it up and just have to throw stuff away. I mean, he can buy himself a little bit of time by, if he gets down a 1-drop, he can turn it into a Wall Roots, which buys him 1 full turn.
Sure.
But he's actually under a huge amount of pressure for a guy with 6 mana, a Revelark, and cards in hand, and 2 Birthing Pods.
You see Shahar considering activating Treetop Village right now.
Oh, absolutely. If he activates Treetop Village by getting in there with all 3, I mean, think about the Louise's spot. If he takes 5 from the Obliterator, he can't actually take damage from the Treetop or the Ooze anymore.
Yep.
So if the Revelark blocks the Treetop, the token is going to have to chump the Scavenging Ooze.
So in we go into the red zone. Treetop, Obliterator, and Ooze. And you see these blocks immediately from Luis.
This is an excellent, excellent attack from Shahar. A lot of people would be more passive in this spot, but Shahar recognizes Luis is going to have to do some unfortunate blocks because he's got 1 life too little. If he would have blocked the Revelark on the Ooze like he would want to, the Treetop Village would trample over.
So you see the trade here. Revelark's going to target some things in the graveyard. Shahar's probably going to remove those cards. But we'll see exactly how many he wants to remove because Twilight Mire's making it a little bit awkward.
Definitely.
So with the Revelark targeting on the stack, it's going to target, looks like Voice of Resurgence and Noble Hierarch. So he's going to remove all those cards down. Going to leave, it looks like he leaves Shriek Maw into the graveyard. So all of a sudden, a 2-drop becomes very interesting.
The problem is he still needs to come up with still needs to come up with an answer to the Obliterator. Shahar, with the strength of Phyrexian Obliterator and Scavenging Ooze, defeats Luis Scott-Vargas 2 games to 1.
Pretty impressive stuff for a matchup that I thought was pretty difficult for Green Black Rock, and I still think it is. But I like the way that he navigated those games absolutely beautifully. And one of the cards that we did mention right at the top, and the reason that Redo kind of included this in his deck was Phyrexian Obliterator.
Oh, absolutely. It's an easy card to underrate.